Hello Year 12, thank you for emailing me all your questions after your first reading of Our Country's Good. Hopefully you even got to read it twice, because sometimes it's quite hard because there's 22 scenes and to follow all the characters it benefits to read it twice. So today I am going to attempt to answer your questions, which I thought were very well put together in as much logical structure as I can. So I would pause the video quickly, go and make sure you get pen and paper or your computer to actually write up these notes, because they're very useful. As your task for this week, I'd like you to send me through your typed up notes so that I can see that your understanding of all the questions posed makes sense. So I'm going to do it in some sort of order that I hope works for you. And some of the questions are similar, so we'll go through as much as I can in this video. It might be in a few parts, just for the process of downloading the video. So basically, I'm going to use three things to help me answer these questions for you. I told you before, as an extension, you could choose to read Robert Hughes' The Fatal Shore. This is the historical accounts. It's brilliant. It's got diary entries, it's got facts about the first colony and all the first fleets that go out to Australia when they're establishing a society out there. Now, I must remind you at this period that it's not a history play. It is a modern epic theatre play that is helping you to think about what society is like in what you exist in. But they're using it as a parable. They're putting it in the past, like historicisation, as Brecht used, so that you are an objective viewer as an audience at looking at what society should be. So we'll highlight all those messages as we go through this video to make sure you're clear. But it's placed in the past to look at a society, a new existence, a new colony, and what makes a successful society. So this is the original source that all the various novels were based on. And also I'll be looking at this. Now, this is something I'd recommend you buy. I have a few in the drama studios when we're back in school that you can lend, but if you want to invest in anything, I think this is very useful. Now, the reason being, it's quite good value. It's about £8, and it is Tim Blake Baker's Our Country Good, a study guide by Max Stafford Clark. Now, Max Stafford Clark you've already learnt about because he is one of the practitioners we've explored. If you remember early on in the course, we looked at the status games, his use of playing cards, he looked at actioning, and he had various techniques. And we have to remember that during this period in the 80s, 90s, and it actually started in the 70s, it was much more fashionable. Rather than a playwright sitting in a room on their own writing their play, it was about a collaborative approach. That means you're working with a company, a director, a playwright, and the actors, and you are constructing a play with lots of sources together. So it was very much a group produce, just like you might have done in devised work that you've produced. So what is really good about this is it is very much for theatre. It's not a literature sort of analysis. It's actually looking at how the company put it into production. So as a dramatist, it's very useful, page to stage. So I would look this one up and try and purchase it if you can, but I will be referencing it and reading a few bits from it during this process. It tells you all about the real characters. A lot of you are asking about characters, and it helps you with your understanding. And obviously I've got the play here as well. So we're going to start actually with Lucy's question. Thank you, Lucy, for your question. It was, what evidence did Baker, the playwright, use to help her message get across to write her play? Now, obviously the source is in front of me, but I'm going to read you a section very quickly from Our Country's Good, because it tells you exactly how they produced it. Now, it's written by Max Stafford Clark, the director, but it refers to the playwright. So the idea: I was, Max Stafford Clark, artistic director at the Royal Court Theatre from 1979 to 1993. In 1987, while searching for a candidate for the Royal Court's biannual production of a classic play, I came across Thomas Kennedy's fascinating novel called The Playmaker. Now, he wrote The Playmaker based on using this source. So I came across this novel. It was set in Australia in the colony. The Playmaker concerns the true story. So I think it was Izzy asked me, did they actually put on a play? And they did in the new colony. It's set, The Playmaker concerns a true story of an amateur convict production of Farquhar's 1796 play, The Recruiting Officer. It was performed for King George III's birthday on the 4th of June in 1789. So they did actually stage a play, and this is where the facts come through. The Playmaker tells the story of the several convicts that sailed to Australia on the First Fleet, which again is what is referred to. At the centre of the novel is Lieutenant Ralph Clark, a young Marine officer desperate for promotion and plagued by homesickness. He directs a production of Farquhar's play and falls in love with one of the quieter female convicts, Mary Brennan. So again, Ralph Clark was actually in the First Fleet. So I think it was Adam said, what characters are based on real people? A great deal of the characters are based on real people that existed. And in Robert Shaw, The Fatal Shore, you will see lines spoken in a diary that Lieutenant Ralph Clark wrote. And you can see that the playwright has actually taken those actual diary accounts and put it into some of the lines that he says in the text. So a lot of them were based on real people, and I'll go into more of those in some detail in a minute. So Harry Brewer is the marshal in Sydney. Before securing the post, Harry had been the oldest midshipman in the Navy, a post usually held by children and teenagers, and is ridiculed by many of the senior officers. He is an alcoholic, tortured by visions of people he has hung, and there's a complex relationship with Ducklin, a young female convict. So again, Amy asked about Harry, a few of you asked about Harry, and I'll go into his monologue in greater detail later. But yes, again, he was based on a real family. His Excellency Governor Arthur Phillip, so Captain Phillip, tries to govern the new colony in a humane and liberal way. The solitary figure in the novel, his convicts and conservative officers, including Major Robbie Ross, and his ambiguous relationship with an Aborigine, are also explored. So they read this novel that was written, to remind you of the title, it was The Playmaker, as another source to the play. Max Stafford Clark said, I began reading The Recruiting Officer, and the idea came to me to revive the classic comedy with a considered adaptation of the play, The Playmaker. Of the novel, The Playmaker. I approached Timberlake Wertenbaker, the playwright, about this project and was really keen. She knew straight away that she wanted to write a play about the humanizing power of theatre. So between the two, Max Stafford Clark thinking, do you know what? I think we can stage a play based on this period about the play that they produced. And Timberlake wanted to talk about the power of theatre. So the two things came together. My previous theatre company, Max Stafford Clark says, was joint stock, followed a particular working method. We would have 3 to 4 hour week workshop with a writer and a group of actors where we researched a book or a theme. Then there'd be 9 to 10 week gap where the writer would then write the play. So basically they workshopped this play together. Now, as Adam said, were the characters based on real people? Yes, they were based on real people, but obviously, I said, the playwright wanted to write about now. And so they also went into prisons and interviewed prisoners about their experience and why they went into crime. And some of the characters in the play, and Liz is one of them, who is that sort of very earthy, sort of lower class character, and she has that big speech in Act 2, Scene 1, and strong Cockney accent, and we find out why people got into crime, and sometimes it was actually encouraged by parents. Thieving was encouraged, and it's why they got into this state of deprivation and couldn't get out and were quite defensive, because ultimately they were abused in their growing up, and so they are a product of their time. And so that was looking at a person that existed in the real world now, and taking those stories and inventing some characters that also looked at why people were criminal, and actually why they felt so deflated, and why and looks at how they can be reformed. One of the big themes of the play is about, can we reform criminals? Now, you will know from your knowledge of the world now that actually a lot of criminals go into prison, and actually there's a bit of a joke about how they become better criminals, because it's the education university of crime. And so what Timberlake Wertenbreak is saying is, how can we reform people while they're in prison? Can we educate them? Can we make them more literate? Can we make them better people? And that is a modern thing, and it actually overlaps with what Captain Phillips thought. He wanted his colony to not be a prison forever. He wanted to reform. He wanted people to finish their transportation time. Remember, they weren't transported forever. They were given a time lapse. So it might be, oh, you're transported to the colony for 7 years or 14 years. And the idea was they returned to Britain. But actually, Captain Phillips wanted them to return to Britain reformed characters, or choose, which they could opt to do, was choose to become actual citizens of Australia. Once they completed their sentence, if they had proved themselves, they were given land, and they could then become farmers themselves and produce and be independent. And he wanted that to happen. He didn't want them to be destined for a disaster, and destined to become worse criminals. So I'll come back to that point in a moment. So hopefully that answers your question. A few questions. One question about what did they help to get the message across, or the different sources they used, and also about what were they based on real characters? Yes, to a certain extent. For example, Captain Phillips was 46 years old. That was an old time to be in the army. They often retired a lot younger. There's even reference to, it's a sad story, about the oldest convict, who was actually 82, and who was the first recorded suicide in Australia, because she hung herself, and there's reference to that in the play, and that is again based on a fact. Ella G asked me about what ages the characters would be. So like I said, Captain Phillips 46, the youngest boy was recorded to be 9, the youngest girl was recorded to be 13, and the oldest convict was 82. So there's a full span. That works out that based on the facts produced, and this is very important for your casting, the facts produced here, the average age of the first fleet was 27. I just want to explain what a first fleet is. The first fleet, a fleet is a combination of ships. There were 11 ships in the first fleet, and then the flagship, that is the main ship, was Sirius, or Cyrus, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's spelled Sirius, and that was led by Captain Phillips. So sometimes that can have a knock-on effect to your design. So for example, there might be crates on stage with the main flagship sort of printed onto the crates, Cyrus, Sirius, or however you'd like to pronounce it. So that can impact your historical knowledge coming through even in your design. So let's pause for a moment and move on to video 2.